Dad, she is lying. The words left the little girl's lips like a spark in a room filled with silence. The office froze. The tall man in the navy suit looked up from his desk, his pen stilling midair. For a heartbeat, he did not move. His blue eyes darted between his daughter's trembling face and the half-open door behind her. Standing in that doorway was the young butler, her hand still on the knob. Her expression was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides panic beneath a practiced smile. The sunlight from the corridor framed her like a spotlight. The little girl took a small step closer to her father. She had to lift her chin to meet his gaze. Her brown eyes shimmered, not from fear but from urgency. Her small hand rose to her mouth as if the truth itself might escape too quickly. "She is lying to you, Dad," she whispered again, slower this time, every word trembling but clear. He blinked, confused. "Lila, what are you talking about?" The air thickened. Outside the window, city traffic hummed faintly, a contrast to the stillness in the room. On the desk sat framed photographs of a family that once felt whole, his late wife's smile, a beach sunset, a memory that hurt to look at now. Lila's fingers pressed against his sleeve. "Please, do not trust her." The young butler's voice broke the tension. "Sir, she must be tired. Children imagine things when they miss their mothers." Her tone was soft, almost gentle, the way a nurse might calm a patient before giving an injection. He looked from one to the other, the father of a 9-year-old suddenly unsure of which world to believe, the quiet order he paid for, or the chaos that came from a child's trembling voice. "Enough," he said, but his voice carried no strength. Lila's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a silver bracelet, small and scratched. "This was in Mom's drawer," she said. She hid it. The butler's smile flickered. "That bracelet was misplaced. I only meant to—" "Stop," Lila cut in. "You took it yesterday. I saw you." The man's pen rolled from the desk and hit the floor with a soft click. No one bent to pick it up. His heartbeat filled the silence. The girl's words clung to the air like smoke that would not fade. For the first time, the butler stepped back toward the hallway. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. Lila's father turned in his chair, his face pale, his breath uneven. He could not decide if this was madness or revelation, but something inside him shifted. Lila stood very still beside the desk, her tiny shadow stretching across the polished wood. The chandelier above them flickered once, as if holding its breath. In that fragile pause, truth began to whisper louder than lies. The silence that followed felt heavier than the polished desk between them. The man's hand hovered over the fallen pen, but he did not reach for it. The city noise outside the window sounded far away, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "Lila," he said finally, his voice tight. "This is not the time for stories." The little girl's shoulders tensed. "It is not a story, Dad. I saw her." "Oh." The young butler stepped forward from the doorway, her soft shoes barely making a sound on the marble floor. Her voice carried calm authority, the kind adults used when they wanted to sound reasonable. "Sir, she must have misunderstood. The child has been through so much since Mrs. Sterling passed. Grief can make memories confusing." Her tone was almost kind, but her eyes never softened. Lila noticed that. The father rubbed his forehead, weary lines deepening between his brows. "I know, Clara. She misses her mother. We all do." He turned toward his daughter, his tone a little gentler. "Sweetheart, it has been a long day. Maybe you saw something that looked strange, but that does not mean anyone was lying." Lila stepped closer, her small hands balled at her sides. "I am not confused," she said. "I remember her going into Mom's room. I remember her hiding something. She looked at me like I was not supposed to see." "Oh," Clara's voice rose slightly, touched with offended grace. "Mr. Sterling, please. I have served this family faithfully. I would never touch anything that belonged to your late wife." He sighed, his tone turning firm. "Enough. I will not have accusations thrown around like this." Lila's lip trembled, but she forced herself not to cry. The chandelier's light shimmered on the tears that she refused to let fall. "You believe her more than me," she whispered. Her father's expression softened, but only for a moment. "Lila, I am your father. I love you, but you cannot go around saying such things. It is not fair." He gestured toward the butler. "Clara, perhaps take a few hours off. I think we all need rest. Clara bowed her head slightly, her voice low. Of course, sir. Then she turned, her eyes flicking toward the little girl, a glance sharp enough to make Lila's heart skip. When the door clicked shut behind her, the office seemed even quieter. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. Lila climbed onto the chair opposite her father. Her feet did not reach the floor. Dad, please listen. She is pretending. She took the bracelet. She was in Mom's room at night. He watched her, torn between reason and guilt. Lila. Sometimes people think they see things because they are scared. You heard me talking to her about your mother's things yesterday. Maybe that made you dream it. She shook her head, curls bouncing. No, Dad, it was not a dream. She saw me watching. That is why she smiled like that. It was a bad smile. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Lila, this is not helping either of us. We are both tired. How about we talk tomorrow? Her small voice hardened, surprisingly steady. Tomorrow might be too late. He blinked. Too late for what? Lila hesitated, then whispered. For you to see who she really is. Her father looked away, toward the framed photograph on his desk, the one of his wife standing on a beach, wind in her hair, Lila held close in her arms. For a second, something flickered behind his eyes, the memory of a promise, maybe, or the fear that his daughter's imagination carried a seed of truth. But reason took over. Lila, he said softly, you need rest. Go to your room. I will talk to Clara in the morning. The words hit like a quiet door closing. Lila slid off the chair without argument. She walked to the door, her small hand brushing against the cold metal handle. Halfway through the doorway, she turned. Dad, if Mom was here, she would believe me. He froze. The pen still lay on the floor, untouched. He could not look at her. Good night, sweetheart, he murmured. She did not answer. When Lila stepped into the hallway, the light there seemed dimmer. The walls felt taller, colder. From the far end, she caught a glimpse of Clara standing near the grand staircase, talking quietly on her phone. Her voice was low, controlled, but her eyes sharp, calculating, lifted for a brief second and met Lila's. Lila ducked behind the wall before Clara could see her staring. Her heart pounded fast, but she stayed silent. She pressed the small silver bracelet against her palm, its cold surface grounding her. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Each chime echoed through the house like a warning only she could hear. In the office, her father remained seated long after she left. His reflection shimmered in the dark glass of the window, haunted and uncertain. He did not know it yet, but doubt had already begun to grow quiet, slow, just like the whisper that had started it all. Lila leaned against her bedroom door, listening to the house settle into uneasy silence. She whispered to herself, "The truth will show itself. It always does." And somewhere below, Clara's quiet footsteps moved across the marble floor, steady and careful, like someone arranging pieces in a game only she knew how to play. The morning light crept through the tall windows of the Sterling estate, painting the marble floors in stripes of gold and white. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that follows an argument, a silence filled with things unsaid. Lila sat at the edge of her bed, her small hands wrapped around the silver bracelet. The faint engraving on its inner side caught the light. It was her mother's handwriting. She traced the curve of the letter S, the beginning of her mother's name, with the tip of her thumb. Downstairs, faint footsteps echoed. The rhythm was soft but quick, familiar. Clara was already awake. Lila could hear her voice drifting up through the stairwell, steady, polite, rehearsed. She was speaking to someone on the phone again. "Yes, everything is under control," Clara said. "He suspects nothing. The child just needs time." Lila froze. Her heart began to pound, but she dared not move. She leaned closer to her bedroom door, listening. "I will bring the papers to the office by noon," Clara continued. "After that, it will be finished." The line went quiet. A moment later, the sound of heels on marble faded toward the lower hall. Lila pressed the bracelet to her chest. She did not fully understand what those words meant, but she understood enough to know that her father was not safe. She took a deep breath and slipped out of her room. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. The early sunlight reached the far end of the corridor where her father's office door stood half open. She crept closer, careful not to make the floorboards creak. The office was empty. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk. The same photograph of her mother still sat near the lamp. The pen her father had dropped last night was still on the floor, right where it had fallen. Lila crouched to pick it up. Her small fingers brushed against something else beneath the desk, a thin flash drive. It was silver, with a blue sticker labeled Financial Records. She turned it over in her hand. It looked out of place, hidden under the heavy desk like something meant to be forgotten. Before she could decide what to do, she heard the click of shoes behind her. "Good morning, Miss Lila." Clara's voice filled the room, smooth as always. The butler stood by the doorway, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. "Up so early?" Lila straightened, the flash drive hidden behind her back. "I could not sleep," she said quietly. Clara's eyes scanned the room. "Neither could I. It has been a difficult night for everyone." She smiled faintly, though the corners of her mouth did not move. "Perhaps you should join your father for breakfast. He will want to see you." "I will," Lila replied. Her voice stayed calm, though her pulse raced. Clara took a few steps closer, glancing toward the desk. "He left his office in such a hurry last night. Men never remember where they put things." She leaned slightly, her gaze flicking toward the floor, like that flash drive he was looking for. Lila froze, her hand tightening around the small object behind her back. "Maybe he will find it later," she said, keeping her eyes low. Clara smiled again, but this time the smile was thin and cold. Maybe. The air in the room felt heavier now. The ticking of the clock seemed louder. Clara turned and left, her heels clicking across the hall. When the sound finally faded, Lila let out a breath she had been holding. She placed the flash drive inside the pocket of her cardigan, next to the bracelet. Moments later, she heard her father calling from the dining room. "Lila, breakfast." She walked downstairs, her small steps echoing through the hall. The long table gleamed under the morning light. A plate of toast and scrambled eggs waited for her. Her father sat at the other end, reading the morning paper, coffee steaming beside him. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, his tone warmer now. "Did you sleep better?" Lila nodded. "A little." She glanced toward Clara, who stood nearby pouring orange juice into his glass. The woman's hands were steady, too steady. Her father folded the newspaper. "Clara tells me you found something last night, a bracelet." Lila's throat tightened. "Yes, it was Mom's." Clara smiled softly. "And now, it is safe again. I cleaned it for her." Lila looked at her father. "She was in Mom's room," she said carefully. The man sighed, setting down his coffee. "Lila, please. We already talked about this. Let us not start the day with arguments." "But Dad..." "Enough," he said, not unkindly but firmly. "I know you miss her. I do too. But Clara has been good to us." Clara lowered her eyes modestly. "Thank you, sir." Lila went silent. She looked down at her plate, picking at the edge of her toast. The bracelet pressed against her wrist under the sleeve. The flash drive felt heavy in her pocket, like a secret that wanted to speak. Her father reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "You are my brave girl, Lila. I just need you to trust me." She nodded, though her mind was already somewhere else. When breakfast ended, Clara collected the dishes. Her voice was light as she said, "I will take the documents to the office before noon." "Sir." Her father nodded without looking up. "Thank you, Clara." As Clara disappeared through the hallway, Lila watched her go, her young mind turning fast. The flash drive in her pocket pulsed with possibility. She did not yet know what it contained, but she knew it was her first real proof. And for the first time since her mother's death, she felt a strange kind of courage rising inside her, quiet, steady, certain. The truth was not gone. It was waiting to be seen. The late morning sunlight poured across the driveway as the black car rolled away from the estate. Clara sat behind the wheel, calm as ever, a leather folder resting beside her. The sound of the engine faded until it was just a distant hum beyond the iron gates. Inside the mansion, the silence returned. Lila stood by the window of her father's office, watching the car disappear down the long private road. She pressed her hand against the glass and whispered, "Now." The housekeeper, Mrs. Dorsey, entered quietly, carrying a basket of freshly folded towels. She had worked for the family for more than 20 years and had known Lila since she was born. "You should not be in here, sweetheart," she said kindly. "Your father is at the company," and Miss Clara said. "I know what she said," Lila interrupted softly, "but I need to find something." Mrs. Dorsey looked at her for a long moment. She saw the same determination she used to see in Mrs. Sterling's eyes. With a small sigh, she closed the office door. "What are you looking for?" Lila reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver flash drive. "This. I think it belongs to Dad, but she was hiding it." Mrs. Dorsey's face changed. "Where did you find that?" "Under the desk," Lila said. "This morning. Clara saw it too. She wanted me to put it back." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, your father keeps his laptop in the drawer. Let us see what is on that thing." She knelt beside the desk and opened the drawer carefully. The computer blinked awake, its screen glowing in the soft daylight. The login page appeared. "He never changed the password," Mrs. Dorsey murmured. "It is your mother's birthday." Lila typed slowly, one number after another, whispering the date, as if it were a prayer. The desktop opened. Folders lined the screen, tidy and color-coded. Mrs. Dorsey inserted the flash drive, and the computer made a small sound. Inside the folder, dozens of documents appeared: bank transfers, property titles, electronic letters. One of them was marked, Estate Amendment. Mrs. Dorsey clicked it open. The first line froze her. The document stated that Mr. Sterling had signed over full management of his late wife's trust to Clara L. Hayden, pending verification of his mental state. The signature at the bottom looked real, but Mrs. Dorsey knew better. "That is not his handwriting," she whispered. "It is too smooth. He writes with a heavier hand." Lila leaned closer. "So she really is lying?" Mrs. Dorsey nodded slowly. "It seems that way, sweetheart." Lila's small fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. "We have to show Dad." Mrs. Dorsey hesitated. "If we tell him now, he might not believe us. We need to be careful. Miss Clara is clever, and she has already made him doubt you." Lila bit her lip. "Then we need more proof." The woman looked at the little girl standing so still and so brave. "You sound just like your mother," she said softly. A faint smile crossed Lila's face. "Mom always said that truth is quiet, but it never goes away." Mrs. Dorsey's eyes glistened. She was right. The faint sound of an approaching car drifted through the open window. Clara was back earlier than expected. Mrs. Dorsey removed the flash drive quickly and slipped it into her apron pocket. "Go upstairs," she whispered. "I will handle this." Lila hesitated but obeyed. She hurried toward the staircase, her small shoes silent on the carpet. From the upper landing, she could see Clara walking into the foyer. The butler carried the same leather folder and a paper cup of coffee. Her expression was calm, even cheerful. She greeted Mrs. Dorsey with a polite smile. "Mr. Sterling is still out?" Clara asked. "Yes, Miss Hayden," Mrs. Dorsey replied evenly. Clara placed the folder on the console table. "Good. I will wait in his office." Mrs. Dorsey felt her pulse rise. "He asked me to tidy the room first," she said quickly. "It will only take a few minutes." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Very well. I will be in the library then." As soon as she disappeared down the hall, Mrs. Dorsey exhaled shakily and hurried upstairs. Lila was waiting just outside her room. "She is back," Lila whispered. "I know," Mrs. Dorsey said. "We have the flash drive. That is our proof, but we cannot let her know we found it. Not yet." "Great." Lila looked at her with the seriousness of someone far older than her years. "Can I keep it safe?" Mrs. Dorsey hesitated, then placed the flash drive in Lila's small palm. "Hide it where no one will look." Lila nodded and tucked it inside the lining of her teddy bear, the one her mother had given her years ago. Later that afternoon, the sound of a car engine filled the driveway again. Mr. Sterling had returned. Clara met him at the door, her voice bright and professional. "Everything went smoothly at the bank, sir. I have the new documents ready for your signature." "Good work," he said, his tone distracted. He removed his coat, looking tired. "Where is Lila?" "She is resting," Clara replied. "She had a busy morning." He smiled faintly. That is good. She needs rest. From the top of the stairs, Lila watched them quietly. She could see the leather folder in Clara's hands. Her father's signature would soon be on another document, one that might take everything he owned. Her heart pounded, but she stayed still. She could not warn him yet, not until she had the full truth. Down below, Clara turned her face slightly toward the staircase. For the briefest second, her calm expression slipped. Her eyes met Lila's, and that small knowing smile returned. Lila stepped back into the shadows. The flash drive was hidden, but the game had changed. She now held the first real piece of the puzzle. And in that quiet mansion where secrets whispered louder than footsteps, a child had begun to fight for her mother's truth. The evening sky turned the color of copper as the last light slid across the windows of the Sterling estate. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The silver utensils touched the plates without sound, and the faint ticking of the dining room clock filled the pauses between words that never came. Lila sat across from her father, her feet barely brushing the carpet beneath her chair. She pushed a piece of bread around her plate, while her father read through a set of papers that Clara had brought from the office. The woman stood behind him, poised and silent, like a shadow that did not belong to the room but had learned how to live there. "Sir," Clara said softly, "these are the final adjustments to the trust fund. Once you sign them, we can transfer the remaining accounts into your private management. It will make things much easier for the family." Lila looked up, watching the way her father's pen hovered over the page. Her heart began to thump hard in her chest. "Dad," she said, her voice small but steady, "you should read it carefully." He looked up, tired but patient. "I will, sweetheart." Clara smiled faintly. "It is all standard, sir. The notary has already reviewed it." Lila's eyes did not leave her. "The same way you looked after Mom's things?" The words landed like a spark on dry paper. The air thickened. Her father lowered the pen slowly. "Lila," he warned, "we are not doing this again." Clara's tone stayed calm, but her face hardened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps I should excuse myself." "No," Lila said quickly. "Stay. You like hearing people lie." Her father's voice rose slightly, sharp with fatigue. "Enough, Lila." The little girl pressed her hands flat on the table to keep them from trembling. "Dad, I found something this morning. You have to see it." Her father frowned. "What are you talking about?" "It is something she hid," Lila said, "in your office." Clara's gaze flickered toward the hall. "That is not true," she said evenly. "I have never hidden anything in this house." Lila met her eyes without blinking. "Then you will not mind if I show him." Her father rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Lila, you are making a scene." The girl stood up, her chair scraping softly against the carpet. "No, Dad, she is making a scene. I am just showing you what is real." For a long moment, no one spoke. The chandelier above them shimmered with a faint sound like breathing glass. Then, with small, deliberate steps, Lila walked out of the dining room and into the hallway. Her father sighed and started to follow, but Clara touched his shoulder lightly. "Please," she said. "Let me speak to her. She is only trying to get attention." He hesitated, torn between frustration and guilt. "All right, but be gentle," he said. "She misses her mother." Clara nodded and left the room. In the hallway, she found Lila standing near the bottom of the staircase, holding her teddy bear tightly to her chest. "You should not speak to your father that way," Clara said softly. Lila looked up at her. "You should not lie to him." The woman's expression remained composed, but there was a faint tremor in her voice now. "You are just a child. You do not understand how hard your father works, how much pressure he carries. He needs stability. That is what I give him." Lila tilted her head slightly. "You mean the kind of stability where he signs things he does not read?" Clara's smile faded. "You are playing with things that do not concern you, Lila. That can be dangerous." The little girl took a small step back, her fingers tightening on the teddy bear. "Truth is not dangerous," she said. "Lies are." The woman exhaled slowly, her control returning. "You are upset, I understand. But one day you will see that I have only tried to help this family." Lila's eyes were steady, dark as the night gathering outside. "Then why are you scared of what I might show him?" For a split second, something raw crossed Clara's face, fear, anger, something she quickly hid. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know enough," Lila said. "You talk on the phone when you think no one is listening. You change Dad's papers, and you keep things that do not belong to you." Clara's voice turned low. "Who told you that?" Lila shook her head. "No one had to." From the dining room came the sound of a chair moving. Her father's footsteps approached. "Everything all right?" he asked. Lila turned to him. "Dad, I just want you to look at something tomorrow. Please. If I am wrong, I will never say another word." He studied her face, the determination there, so much like his wife's, that it made his chest ache. "Fine," he said at last. "Tomorrow morning." Clara forced a small laugh. "That is fair, sir. Let her show you whatever she wants." The girl nodded once. "I will." That night, Lila placed her teddy bear beside her pillow, the hidden flash drive stitched safely inside. The moonlight fell across her face, pale and calm. She whispered softly, "Mom, help him see." Down the hall, in the guest room, Clara stood by the window with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was cold now, stripped of its sweetness. "Yes," she said quietly. "The documents are signed except for the final page. He will sign in the morning. After that, everything is done. The girl does not matter." She ended the call and closed the curtains. In another part of the house, Lila's father sat awake in his study. The pen from the night before still rested where he had left it. He looked toward the photo of his wife and whispered. She would have known. The house settled into silence again, but somewhere inside that silence, the truth waited small, patient, and unbreakable, just like the little girl who would not stop believing in it. The next morning arrived with a pale light and a hush that settled over the Sterling mansion like early fog. The clock in the hall had just struck 8 when the first sound of footsteps came from the upper floor. Lila woke with the faint ache that comes from sleeping too lightly. She sat up in bed, clutching her teddy bear close. Her eyes went to the window where gray clouds pressed against the glass. The day felt heavy before it even began. She reached under the bear's soft fur, feeling the hidden flash drive stitched inside. It was still there, still safe. Downstairs, her father was already in the study, his tie half loosened, papers spread across the desk. The night had been long. He had slept little. The words from his daughter's mouth replayed in his mind over and over like a song he could not stop hearing. "Truth is not dangerous. Lies are." He rubbed his temples, whispering to himself, maybe she only imagined it. But deep inside, something in him resisted that thought. The door opened gently. Clara entered, carrying a tray with coffee and a single folded document. "Good morning, sir," she said with her calm voice. "You had a difficult night. This will help." He nodded absently. "Thank you, Clara. Leave it there." She placed the tray on the desk and stood silently for a moment, her eyes steady on him. "The last page from the trust paperwork needs your signature," she said softly. "Then everything is finalized." He sighed, glancing at the paper. "Yes, I remember. I can handle the delivery after," she added smoothly. "You have enough on your mind." Before he could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. "Dad." Both turned. Lila stood there in her pale blue cardigan, hair still messy from sleep, holding her teddy bear. Clara's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said politely. Lila stepped closer, keeping her gaze on her father. "You promised to look at something this morning." Her father looked between the two of them. "Lila, I have a meeting soon. It will only take a minute," she said quickly. "Please, Dad." Clara took a careful step forward. "Mr. Sterling, I can wait outside if you prefer." He raised a hand. "No, stay. I want to hear what this is about." Lila placed the teddy bear on the desk, right next to the papers. "This," she said, touching the bear's arm, "has something inside it. I found it in your office. It is important." Her father frowned. "Inside it?" She nodded and carefully opened a small seam near the stitching. With delicate fingers, she pulled out the flash drive. The room went still. Clara's smile tightened, but she said nothing. Lila placed the drive next to his laptop. "It was under your desk. I think it has something you should see." Her father hesitated. "Lila, where did you learn how to do this?" "Mrs. Dorsey helped me," she said. She said it was yours. He looked toward Clara. Is it? For the briefest second, something flickered behind her calm eyes. It might be, she said carefully. I cannot be sure. I handle so many of your documents. Lila took a small step closer. You knew it was missing. You said so yesterday morning. But you did not tell him you found it. Clara opened her mouth to reply, but Mr. Sterling lifted his hand again. Enough. Let us just see what is on it. He inserted the flash drive and waited. The computer screen glowed to life, the folders appearing one by one. Lila stood beside him, watching. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the others could hear it. A list of documents appeared: letters, records, transfers, and one folder marked Estate Amendment. He clicked it open. The document filled the screen. His own signature stared back at him from the bottom, perfectly formed yet not his. He froze. Clara spoke quickly, her tone even. Sir, that is a draft. It was never submitted. Oh no. Lila's small voice cut through the air. You said yesterday that everything was finalized. He turned sharply toward Clara. Did I sign this? Of course not, she said smoothly. It must have been an early version. Someone at the office could have. He stood, pushing the chair back. Enough lies, Clara. For the first time, her composure cracked. I was only protecting your interests, she said, her voice trembling. You have no idea how much the firm was taking from you. I corrected the documents to keep your assets safe. You forged my signature, he said quietly. That is not protection. That is betrayal. Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She looked at her father. Now do you believe me? He knelt down beside her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Yes, sweetheart, I believe you. Clara took a step back, her face pale. You do not understand, sir. He straightened. I think you should leave the house, Clara, right now. She opened her mouth, but the words would not come. Then, without another sound, she turned and walked toward the door. The echo of her heels followed her down the marble hall until the sound vanished completely. Lila leaned against her father's arm, relief washing through her like sunlight after rain. He exhaled slowly, closing the laptop. I should have listened to you sooner. She shook her head. You did now. That is what matters. He smiled weakly. You are too wise for your age. Lila glanced at the silver bracelet around her wrist. Mom used to say, truth is quiet, but it never stops. He looked at her, eyes glistening. She was right. They stood there in the soft morning light, father and daughter, both changed in a way neither could explain. Outside, the clouds began to break, letting sunlight pour across the lawn. Inside, the mansion felt lighter for the first time in many months. The lies had fallen silent. The truth had finally spoken. The sun had climbed higher by the time Clara's car disappeared beyond the gate. The heavy sound of the closing door echoed through the halls of the Sterling mansion. For the first time in weeks, the house was still. Mr. Sterling stood in the middle of his study, one hand resting on the back of his chair, the other clutching the folded document he had just printed from the flash drive. The words on it burned into his eyes: a transfer of assets, his forged signature, and a list of accounts he had never opened. He had always believed that loyalty was earned through trust. Now he understood how quickly trust could become blindness. Across the room, Lila sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, watching her father with quiet caution. Her small voice broke the silence. Dad, is she gone for good? He turned toward her. Yes, sweetheart. She will not come back here again. Lila's eyes searched his face. Will you tell the police? He hesitated, then set the document on the desk. I will, but first I need to understand everything she did. If I rush, I might miss something. She nodded slowly, holding her teddy bear against her chest. She was smart. He managed a faint smile. So are you. The air between them softened. For the first time since her mother's passing, they could speak without the weight of misunderstanding pressing between them. I did not want to be right, Lila said. I just wanted you to see what I saw. He crossed the room and knelt down in front of her, the same way he used to when she was frightened of thunder. You were brave, Lila, braver than most adults I know. Her lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. Mom would be proud of you now, she whispered. His throat tightened. He placed a hand on her cheek. and she would be proud of you." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, making the branches whisper against the windows. Then came a sound, a soft knock at the front door. Mr. Sterling straightened, startled. "Stay here," he said gently. He crossed the hall and opened the door. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Dorsey, her kind eyes tired but steady. She held a small envelope in her hands. "Sir," she said, "I thought you should have this. It came with the morning mail." He took it, nodding. "Thank you, Mrs. Dorsey. Come in." She followed him to the study where Lila waited. Her face softened when she saw the girl. "There you are, my brave one," she said warmly. Lila smiled. "We did it. Dad believes me now." Mrs. Dorsey's eyes glistened. "I never doubted you." Mr. Sterling opened the envelope. Inside was a single key attached to a note written in neat handwriting. It read, "You do not know the whole story. The answers are in the lake house." His jaw tightened. "The lake house," he murmured. Lila looked up. "The one where we used to go in the summer?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, your mother loved that place." Mrs. Dorsey frowned. "I did not even know you still owned it. It was closed after she passed," he said. "Clara was in charge of maintaining it. She said there were no remaining records there." Lila's fingers tightened around her teddy bear. "Maybe that is why she wanted us to forget it." He met his daughter's eyes. "Maybe." Later that afternoon, Mr. Sterling packed a small briefcase. Lila followed him into the foyer, her curiosity mixed with worry. "Are we going to the lake house now?" she asked. He hesitated. "It might be better if I go first, just to check." She shook her head. "No. If it is about Mom, I need to see it too." Her tone was soft but sure. He saw his wife's same quiet fire reflected in that little face. "All right," he said. "We will go together." Mrs. Dorsey handed them a thermos of tea. "Be careful," she said. "That place has been empty for a long time." The drive took nearly an hour. The winding road cut through tall pines and ended at the edge of a silver-blue lake. The cabin stood waiting, small and still, dust clinging to the windows like a memory that refused to fade. Mr. Sterling unlocked the door. The hinges groaned in protest. Dust rose into the afternoon light. Lila stepped inside behind him, her eyes wide. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. The furniture was covered with white sheets. A picture frame sat on the mantel, her mother smiling on the front porch, sunlight in her hair. "Dad," Lila whispered. "It still feels like her." He swallowed hard. "I know." He began searching the drawers and cabinets, finding nothing but empty folders and a few broken pens. Then Lila's gaze caught something near the fireplace, a small wooden box half hidden behind a loose plank. "Dad," she said, pointing. He pulled the box free and placed it on the table. The latch was stiff but unlocked. Inside lay several papers tied with a ribbon, and beneath them, a small voice recorder. Lila looked at him. "Is that Mom's?" He turned the recorder over in his hand. "It might be." He pressed the play button. At first, there was only static. Then came a soft voice, his wife's. "If you are hearing this, it means something has gone wrong. The documents Clara brought to me were not real. She wanted access to the accounts, but I refused to sign. I am keeping copies here, in the safe, until I can talk to you." The message ended with a faint breath, and the click of the recorder stopping. Lila covered her mouth. "Mom knew," she whispered. Mr. Sterling closed his eyes, grief and anger mixing in his chest. "She tried to warn us." He looked down at his daughter, who stood tall and quiet beside him. "You finished what she started." Outside, the wind carried across the lake, gentle but strong. The light reflected off the water, casting ripples across the walls. For the first time in a long time, the truth no longer whispered. It spoke clearly, through a mother's voice, a father's awakening, and a child's unwavering courage. The afternoon light dimmed as the clouds thickened over the lake. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. Inside the cabin, the quiet hum of the voice recorder still echoed in their ears long after the message had stopped playing. Lila stood beside the wooden table, her small hands pressed against its rough surface. Her father had not moved. He was still staring at the recorder. The lines around his eyes deepened with disbelief and regret. "She tried to warn us," he murmured again. "All this time, the truth was right here." Lila's eyes lifted toward him. She was brave, Dad. Just like you said people should be when they know something is wrong. He looked at her then, his expression softening. No, sweetheart, she was like you. The wind outside pushed against the windows, making them rattle. The sound reminded him that the storm was coming fast. We should head back soon, he said. It will be dark before we know it. But Lila's gaze stayed on the box. Wait, she said quietly. There is something else. Oh. Her small fingers untied the ribbon around the stack of papers. Inside were handwritten notes, receipts, and one sealed envelope marked with her mother's name. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, and slanted. Lila looked up at her father, silently asking permission. He nodded. She broke the seal carefully and unfolded the paper. The letter was dated 3 days before her mother's accident. To my dearest Richard and our sweet Lila, if anything happens to me, promise me you will not trust Clara Hayden with the accounts. She came to me asking for signatures I did not understand. I fear she is not who she says she is. There are copies of everything hidden at the lake house. Protect them and protect each other. Love always. Margaret. Lila read the words slowly, her voice trembling but clear. When she finished, her father took the letter from her and held it against his chest. He closed his eyes. She knew. She tried to protect us. Lila reached for his hand. She did protect us, Dad. We just did not know it until now. For a long moment, they stayed there in silence. The only sound was the soft patter of rain beginning to fall against the roof. Mr. Sterling took a deep breath and turned toward the recorder again. This changes everything. We have proof, not just of the fraud, but of what your mother tried to stop. Lila looked at the window, where droplets ran down the glass like tears. Do you think Clara knew about the recording? He shook his head. If she did, she would have destroyed it. No, this was hidden too well. Your mother always thought ahead. He placed the letter and the recorder into his briefcase, locking it shut. We will take this straight to the police in the morning. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The rain thickened, tapping against the walls like impatient fingers. Lila hesitated, glancing toward the corner of the room where the photograph of her mother stood. Can we stay here for a little while? She asked softly. Just until the rain stops. Her father looked at her and nodded. Of course. They sat together on the old couch near the fireplace. He lit a small fire with the wood that had been left behind. The flames flickered to life, casting a warm glow across the room. The golden light danced across Lila's face, softening her features and making her look almost like the child from the photograph, small, curious, full of hope. She rested her head against his arm. Do you think Mom knew we would find this? I think she hoped we would, he said. She trusted the truth to find its way. The fire crackled. The sound of rain grew steady, filling the spaces between their words. After a few quiet moments, Lila spoke again. Do you think Clara will try to come back? Her father's jaw tightened. Not if the law finds her first, but even if she does, she will not win. Not this time. Lila looked at the fire. She must have been scared of Mom. People who lie are always scared of people who tell the truth. He smiled faintly. You are wiser than you know, Lila. The storm outside deepened. The sky turned almost black, and flashes of lightning illuminated the lake beyond the window. The sound of thunder rolled through the cabin, but neither of them flinched. Lila reached for the bracelet on her wrist, turning it slowly. Mom said this bracelet meant protection, she whispered. Maybe she was right. Her father looked down at her. Maybe she was not talking about the bracelet. Maybe she meant that love protects us even when we think we are alone. She nodded, understanding. The firelight shimmered on her bracelet, sending small reflections across the walls. Minutes passed before Lila spoke again. Dad, when we go home, can we put Mom's picture back on your desk? He smiled, his eyes glistening. Yes, sweetheart, it belongs there. The rain began to ease, leaving only the sound of dripping water from the eaves. The air smelled fresh, clean, renewed. Mr. Sterling stood and looked out through the window. Across the dark lake, a streak of light broke through the clouds. He placed a hand over his daughter's shoulder. Come on, he said gently. It is time to go home. She rose, holding her teddy bear close. Together they stepped outside into the cool air, the ground damp beneath their feet. The lake rippled with silver reflections. As they walked toward the car, Lila turned once more toward the cabin. The window still glowed faintly from the firelight inside. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Her father heard her but did not speak. He simply took her hand. The storm had passed, but its memory remained a reminder that truth, like light after rain, always finds its way through the clouds. The drive back from the lake was long and quiet. The rain had stopped, but the road still glistened with thin layers of water that reflected the gray sky. Lila sat in the back seat, watching the trees blur past her window. Her teddy bear rested in her lap, the same one that had carried the secret flash drive. Her father drove with both hands on the steering wheel, eyes steady on the road, but his thoughts were far away. The letter, the recording, and the proof now sitting safely in his briefcase weighed heavier than anything he had ever carried before. Every few minutes, he glanced into the rearview mirror to look at his daughter. Her small face was calm, but her eyes were deep with thought, far older than her years. When they reached the city limits, he spoke for the first time. "When we get home, we will call Detective Howard. He was the one who handled your mother's case. He will know what to do." Lila nodded. "Will we tell him everything?" "Yes," her father said firmly. "Every single thing." The mansion appeared on the horizon, standing tall against the fading light. The last rays of the afternoon touched the windows, giving the house an almost peaceful glow. But Lila could not shake the feeling that something inside was waiting for them. As they pulled into the driveway, the front gate opened automatically. The security lights came on, one by one. Her father parked the car and stepped out first. The moment his shoes touched the stone path, he noticed that the front door was slightly open. He frowned. "That is strange. I locked it before we left." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "Maybe Mrs. Dorsey came back early?" "Maybe," he said, but his tone was uncertain. He gestured for her to stay close as they entered the house. The air inside felt colder than usual. The faint smell of perfume lingered, an expensive scent that did not belong to Mrs. Dorsey. Her father called out, "Mrs. Dorsey?" No answer came. The hall was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner. A faint sound came from the living room, a shuffle, quick and light. Lila's fingers tightened around her father's hand. "Stay behind me," he whispered. They turned the corner, and there, standing near the glass cabinet, was Clara. Her elegant coat was soaked from the rain, her hair undone, her face pale but composed. "Good evening, Richard," she said softly. "You did not answer my calls." He stared at her in disbelief. "You should not be here." Clara smiled faintly. "I had to be sure you were safe. After all, we have both been through so much." Lila stepped closer to her father, her voice small but steady. "You should leave. We know everything." Clara's eyes flicked toward the child. "Do you?" she asked, almost amused. "You think one letter and an old recording change the truth? You do not understand the world your father lives in, little one. Nothing is simple in business." Her father's voice hardened. "This is not business, Clara. This is deceit. You forged documents. You lied to my daughter. You tried to steal what Margaret built for this family." Clara took a slow breath. "You were never supposed to find that recording. She made me promise to destroy it, but I could not. I thought if I kept everything quiet, I could fix it before you saw the damage." "You call that fixing it?" he asked. Her calm began to slip. "I did it for you," she said, her tone rising. "You were drowning after Margaret's death. You stopped working. You stopped caring. Someone had to keep things together." He shook his head. "You used our grief as a weapon." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then her gaze softened, almost sorrowful. "Maybe I did, but you have no idea what I gave up for you." Lila spoke before her father could respond. "You gave up the truth." The words hung in the air like a final chord. Clara blinked, her confidence cracking. "You sound just like her," she whispered. "Just like Margaret." Her father took a step forward. "Leave, Clara, right now, before I make that call." Clara's expression hardened again. "You will not call anyone. You never liked scandal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I will take truth over silence." The sound of his voice, steady and final, broke something inside her. Clara turned quickly toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Do not follow me," she said without turning back. "You have your truth. Let me keep my name." The door slammed behind her, and the house fell silent once more. Lila let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her father lowered the phone slowly, his hands shaking. "It is over," he said quietly. Lila looked up at him. "Is it really?" He knelt beside her. "Yes, because this time, I will not hide the truth." From the corner of the room, Mrs. Dorsey appeared, her eyes wide with worry. "Sir, I saw her car leaving fast. Are you both all right?" "We are fine," he said, his voice steadying. "We found what we needed." "Mrs." Dorsey looked at Lila and smiled softly. "Then your mother can finally rest easy." Lila glanced at the bracelet around her wrist. The silver gleamed under the light, like a quiet promise kept. Her father stood and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow, we go to the police. After that, everything changes." Lila nodded, her eyes filled with something calm and certain. "It already has." Outside, the wind carried away the last traces of rain, and the night settled gently over the house that had seen too many secrets. Inside, for the first time, the truth was no longer hidden in whispers. It lived in their hearts, steady and unshakable. Morning light broke over the city, casting long streaks of gold across the windows of the Sterling mansion. The house was quiet again, but this time it was not the silence of fear, it was the calm that comes after a storm. Lila woke early, her mind still tangled with fragments of the night before. She could still hear the echo of Clara's voice, soft and bitter, fading into the rain. She sat up in bed and looked around her room. The morning sunlight touched the corners of her books, her drawings, and the little teddy bear that had once carried the flash drive. Her father was already awake. Downstairs in the study, he sat behind his desk, the letter from Margaret unfolded before him. The words were gentle, but they carried weight, the kind of truth that changes everything. He looked up when Lila stepped into the room. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, his tone tired but lighter than before. "Good morning, Dad," she said softly. "Did you sleep?" He smiled faintly. "A little, not much." He closed the letter carefully. "Today we go to the police. It is time to finish this." Lila nodded. "Will they believe us?" He looked at her with a seriousness that softened into affection. "They will. We have evidence. And more than that, we have your mother's words. They will see the truth." For a few moments they sat in silence. The sound of the clock filled the air, rhythmic and steady, like a heartbeat returning to normal after a long fright. Then came a knock at the door. Mrs. Dorsey entered, her hair neatly pinned, her face kind as always. "Breakfast is ready," she said, then hesitated. "Sir, there is something else. The security office called. They said the night camera recorded movement by the front gate around 2 in the morning. Mr. Sterling frowned. "Did they identify who it was?" "They could not," she said. "It was too dark, but it looked like someone on foot." Lila felt a chill crawl down her arms. "Do you think it was her?" Her father looked out the window at the long driveway. The morning light stretched across it, revealing no footprints now, only damp gravel. "It might have been," he said quietly, "but we will not let fear lead us anymore." He rose and placed the briefcase on the desk. Inside were the letter, the forged documents, and the voice recorder. He locked it shut and handed it to Lila. "Hold this for me. It belongs to both of us now." Her small hands took it carefully. "We will tell them everything." "That is right," he said. A few hours later, they arrived at the precinct. The building was tall and gray, with wide stone steps and a flag waving in the light breeze. Detective Howard, the same man who had once handled Margaret Sterling's accident, met them in his office. His hair had grayed since then, but his eyes were sharp and kind. "Mr. Sterling," he said, shaking his hand, "it has been a while, and you must be Lila. You have grown." Lila gave a small nod. "We have something important to show you." The detective gestured toward the chairs. "Please, sit down." Mr. Sterling opened the briefcase and laid the evidence on the desk, the flash drive, the documents, and the letter. "We discovered these at the lake house. My wife recorded a message before she died. She mentioned Clara Hayden and warned me not to trust her." Detective Howard listened carefully, his expression steady. He played the recording, leaning closer as Margaret's voice filled the room. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. "This is strong evidence," he said. "We will open a new investigation immediately." Lila sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the detective's face. "Will you find her?" she asked. He looked at her with a gentle smile. "We will try our best, but you have already done something remarkable, young lady. You brought the truth forward." Her father's eyes softened with pride. "She is her mother's daughter." The detective took the letter carefully. "We will verify the handwriting and trace the accounts. If Clara Hayden is involved in this, she will face justice." As they left the office, Lila felt something she had not felt in months: relief. The truth was no longer trapped inside their home. It was out in the world, where it could breathe. They stepped outside into the sunlight. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did this, Lila." She shook her head. "We did it together." He smiled. "Yes, we did." "Oh." They walked to the car, and for the first time in a long while, Lila noticed how the world looked different. The colors were brighter, the air felt lighter, and even the city noise seemed softer. When they returned home, Mrs. Dorsey met them at the door. "How did it go?" she asked. "It went well," Mr. Sterling said. "The detective will take it from here." Mrs. Dorsey nodded, relief showing in her eyes. "Then maybe this house can have peace again." Lila looked around the foyer. The light that streamed through the windows no longer felt cold. She placed her teddy bear on the console table near the family photographs. Her father followed her gaze to the framed picture of Margaret. He lifted it gently and placed it back on his desk, exactly where it had always belonged. "Welcome home," he whispered. Lila smiled. She never left. That evening, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, Lila sat by the window watching the sunset. Her father joined her with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Do you think Mom knows?" she asked. He looked toward the sky. "I think she does, and I think she is proud." Lila took a small sip of her drink and leaned her head against his arm. "I can hear her sometimes. In the wind. It sounds like she is saying thank you." He smiled, his eyes glistening. "Then let us thank her too." The sun dipped behind the trees, and the light faded slowly, leaving behind the soft hum of evening. The house no longer felt like a place of secrets. It felt like a home again, a place where truth had finally found its voice. The next morning rose calm and golden, the kind of morning that seemed to wash away everything that had come before. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Sterling mansion, touching the polished floors and the framed photographs on the walls. For the first time in many months, the house felt alive again. Lila was already awake. She sat by the kitchen window, her chin resting on her hand, watching the garden outside where dew still clung to the grass. The birds were back, their songs soft and rhythmic, like a quiet promise that things could be good again. Her father entered the kitchen carrying the morning paper. His tie was loose, his eyes tired but peaceful. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said. "Good morning, Dad," Lila replied with a small smile. "Did the detective call yet?" He nodded. "He did. They traced some of the accounts Clara created. The police found transactions she made under false names. They believe she is trying to leave the country." Lila's hand froze around her mug. "So she is running away?" He sighed. "It seems that way. But the police are already tracking her movements. They will find her soon." Lila looked down at her cocoa, her reflection rippling in the dark surface. "I do not want her to disappear before she tells the truth." He placed his hand over hers. "She cannot hide forever. The truth always finds a way." The kitchen filled with the smell of toast as Mrs. Dorsey entered, wiping her hands on her apron. "You both should eat something," she said warmly. "The day will be long." Mr. Sterling smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mrs. Dorsey. I do not know what we would do without you." The woman gave a soft laugh. "You would manage, but I am glad to be here." She turned to Lila. "I saw your drawing on the refrigerator. Is that your mother's garden?" Lila nodded. "Yes, I remembered how it looked before everything changed." Mrs. Dorsey's voice softened. "She would have loved that." They ate quietly together. Every sound, the clink of a spoon, the rustle of paper felt peaceful, ordinary, precious. Later that morning, the doorbell rang. Mr. Sterling opened it to find Detective Howard standing on the porch, his coat draped over his arm. His expression was serious but kind. "Good morning," the detective said. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, Mr. Sterling said, stepping aside. Please come in. Lila watched as the detective placed a folder on the table. We located Miss Hayden early this morning, he said. She was at a small private airfield north of the city. We have taken her into custody. Lila's eyes widened. You found her? Yes, the detective said. She did not resist arrest. She asked to speak with you, Mr. Sterling. Her father frowned. With me? She said she wanted to explain something before the trial. We will arrange a time for you to meet, but only if you choose to. He hesitated. I do not know what she could possibly say now. The detective nodded. Sometimes, people realize too late what they have done. It is your decision. Lila looked up at her father. You should talk to her, she said softly. Maybe she wants to tell the truth. He studied her face. Do you really think she deserves that chance? Lila nodded slowly. Mom would have listened. He smiled sadly. Yes, she would have. The detective handed him a card. Call me when you decide. The evidence you provided is enough for the court. She cannot hurt you or Lila again. Thank you, detective, Mr. Sterling said. You have done more for us than you know. When the door closed behind the officer, the house was quiet again. Lila looked at her father. Will you go? He took a deep breath. I think I should, for closure. Can I come with you? He shook his head gently. Not this time, sweetheart. Some truths are meant for grown-ups to face alone. She lowered her gaze. Then will you tell me what she says? I promise. That afternoon, the detective arranged the meeting at the county detention center. The drive there was long, lined with bare trees and gray clouds that moved slowly across the sky. When Mr. Sterling entered the small room, Clara was already sitting behind a glass divider, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked different, paler, smaller, the confidence gone from her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Richard, I did not think you would come. He sat down across from her. I came because my daughter believes in forgiveness. Clara looked down. She is remarkable. She reminds me of your wife. He said nothing. After a moment, she continued. I never meant to hurt you. When Margaret died, I thought I could keep everything together. But greed has a way of convincing people that they are saving others when they are only saving themselves. He studied her quietly. You forged my name. You took advantage of my grief. She nodded slowly. I did, and I will accept what comes. But I needed you to know that your wife was right to trust you. She said once that you would find your way back to the truth. His eyes glistened. You spoke to her before the accident? Clara nodded again. The day before. She told me she forgave me for trying to manipulate her. That is why I could not destroy the recording. It was her voice that haunted me. He leaned back, breathing deeply. I suppose we all live with ghosts. When the meeting ended, Clara was led away quietly. Mr. Sterling walked out into the cold air, his heart heavy but unburdened. That evening, he found Lila waiting for him on the porch steps. The sunset burned orange above the trees. What did she say? Lila asked. He sat beside her. She said Mom forgave her. Lila looked up at the fading sky. Then Mom was right. Forgiveness makes the truth lighter. He nodded, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Yes, sweetheart, it does. The wind carried the last light of day across the lawn, and the house behind them glowed in soft amber hues. For the first time, the truth no longer hurt. It simply lived, steady and whole, in the quiet between father and daughter. The next day dawned clear and cold. The sky was the pale blue of winter glass, and the trees in front of the Sterling mansion stood motionless in the still air. Inside, the scent of coffee and toast drifted through the hallways. The world outside seemed calm, but inside the house, everything felt quietly different. Lila sat at the kitchen table, sketching in her notebook. Her drawings had changed lately. They were no longer of storms or shadows. Now she drew sunlight and faces that smiled again. Her father entered the room holding a brown envelope from the police department. His expression was steady but unreadable. Good morning, he said softly. Good morning, Dad, she replied, looking up from her page. Did Detective Howard call? He nodded. Yes. He sent over the official report, Clara confessed. Lila's pencil slipped slightly on the paper. She told them everything? He set the envelope on the table and sat across from her. Yes. Every forged document, every false transfer. She also confirmed that your mother had confronted her the day before the accident. That was the day your mother recorded the message. Lila was quiet for a long moment, so Mom was trying to stop her. Yes, he said, his voice gentle. And now the world finally knows what she tried to protect. The words settled between them like the soft falling of dust in sunlight. After breakfast, he went into the study. The room that once held so many secrets now looked peaceful. The family photo of Margaret sat on the desk again, beside the small silver bracelet and the teddy bear that Lila had refused to hide away. He opened the envelope and read through the report. Each page was a quiet confirmation of everything they already knew. Clara's confession was written in clean, even handwriting, as if she had finally stopped fighting the truth. She had written one final note at the end. I know I cannot undo what I have done, but I hope that telling the truth gives the child peace. She is stronger than any of us. He closed the file and leaned back in his chair, the sunlight warming his shoulders. For the first time in many months, his heart did not ache with confusion. It ached with something gentler release. Outside the study, Lila's voice floated down the hallway. Dad, can we go to the lake house one last time? He looked toward the door. Today? She nodded. Just to say goodbye to Mom's place. He smiled faintly. All right, I think she would like that. The drive was quiet. The road wound through the tall pines, the air crisp and cold. When they reached the lake, the water shone like glass beneath the pale Sunday. The cabin stood still and familiar, a place that had witnessed the beginning and the end of their long search for truth. Lila stepped out of the car and inhaled deeply. It smells the same, she said, like rain and wood. Her father smiled. Some things never change. They walked to the porch together. Inside, the air was cool and still. The faint scent of ash lingered from the fire they had built days before. Lila moved to the table where the recorder had once Saturday. Do you think Mom would want us to keep this place? She asked. He thought for a moment. Maybe not forever, but for now, yes. It is part of her story and ours. Lila traced her fingers along the wooden edge of the table. I like that it is quiet here. It feels like she is still listening. He knelt beside her. She is, sweetheart. Every time you tell the truth, every time you are brave, she is listening. She smiled, and the sunlight caught the bracelet on her wrist, making it glimmer. Then I will keep telling the truth, even when it is hard. He nodded. That is what strength looks like. They stayed there for a while, sitting near the window where the view of the lake stretched wide and still. The wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying the sound of water lapping against the shore. After some time, Lila stood and walked toward the fireplace. There, on the mantel, lay the photograph of her mother they had left behind. She lifted it gently and turned to her father. Can we take it home now? He nodded. Yes, it belongs with us. She held it close to her chest as they left the cabin. When they reached the car, she looked back one last time. The light reflecting off the lake made the windows glow, as if the cabin itself was saying farewell. On the drive home, Lila leaned her head against the window. Dad, can we plant a garden in the yard like Mom used to have? He smiled. I think that is a perfect idea. What kind of flowers did she like most? Daisies, he said. She always said they looked like small suns. Lila's eyes softened. Then we will plant a whole field of them. He laughed gently. I will help you. When they arrived home, the house no longer felt like a place of shadows. It felt warm and filled with quiet energy. The afternoon sun poured through the windows, lighting every corner that once felt dark. Lila placed the photograph on the mantel above the fireplace, next to the teddy bear. The silver bracelet gleamed on her wrist as she whispered, We did it, Mom. Her father stood behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Yes, he said softly. We did. As evening fell, the two of them sat together near the fire. Outside, the first stars began to appear, small and steady in the wide sky. Lila looked up at her father. Does the truth always win? He thought for a moment before answering. It might take time, but yes, it always does. She smiled and leaned her head against him. Then Mom must be smiling too. He looked toward the photograph, the light from the fire flickering across his late wife's gentle face. I think she is, sweetheart. I think she finally is. The fire crackled softly, and outside, the night deepened. Inside, Father and daughter sat in peaceful silence, surrounded not by secrets, but by the warmth of love and the quiet strength of truth. The following week unfolded with a quiet rhythm the Sterling family had not felt in a long time. The weight that had once filled every hallway of the house seemed to have lifted. Lila woke each morning to the soft light pouring through her window and the sound of her father humming faintly downstairs. She had started planting the garden they had promised to grow together. The air smelled of soil and daisies. Her small hands pressed the earth carefully around each root, as if each flower were a secret that needed protection. Her father knelt beside her, sleeves rolled up, his tie forgotten for once. "She would have liked this," he said, patting the ground beside her. Lila smiled. "I think she already does." They worked quietly for a while. Birds darted between the trees, their wings glinting in the sunlight. When the last patch of soil was turned, Lila stood up and brushed her hands clean. "When the flowers bloom, can we bring some to the lake?" Her father nodded. "We will make that our spring tradition." By midday, Mrs. Dorsey brought out lemonade and sandwiches. She watched them with a fond smile. "You two look like a picture," she said warmly. "This house finally feels alive again." Lila took the glass with both hands. "It is because the truth is here now." Mrs. Dorsey's eyes softened. "Yes, sweetheart, truth brings peace." After lunch, Mr. Sterling went to his study to make a few calls. The phone line had been filled with new beginnings, lawyers closing the final case, the detective confirming the end of the investigation, and the charity foundation his late wife had once dreamed of restarting. He opened his notebook and began to write. Margaret's Promise Foundation to help children find safety, truth, and second chances. He looked toward the photograph on his desk. "We are starting over," he said quietly. "And it will be honest this time." Later that afternoon, Lila wandered into the study carrying her sketchbook. "Can I draw here?" she asked. "Of course," he said, smiling. She sat near the window, legs tucked under her chair, pencil moving lightly across the page. After a few minutes, she asked, "What will the foundation do?" He looked up. "It will help families who are struggling. It will give children a voice when no one listens." She thought for a moment. "Like when no one listened to me?" He paused, then nodded. "Exactly like that. You showed me how much truth can change people. Now we will help others do the same." Lila smiled and went back to her drawing. "Then I will draw the logo." What will it look like?" She held up the paper after a few minutes. On it was a small hand holding a daisy, with the words "Promise of Light" written beneath. He studied it for a long moment. "That," he said, "is perfect." Evening came with a golden hush. They ate dinner together at the long wooden table, the same one that had once carried the tension of silence and suspicion. Tonight, it carried laughter. Lila told a story about a bird that kept stealing her daisies, and her father promised to build a tiny fence to protect them. After dinner, Mrs. Dorsey brought out a small box wrapped in linen. "This came from the police," she said. "They said it was returned after the investigation closed." Mr. Sterling untied the ribbon and opened it. Inside were a few of Margaret's belongings from the accident, her wedding ring, a locket, and a folded note sealed in plastic. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the note. The handwriting was faint but familiar. "If you ever feel lost, look for the light. It always begins with kindness." He passed the note to Lila. She read it slowly, her lips forming each word as if it were a prayer. When she finished, she looked up at him. "She is still helping us, Dad." He smiled gently. "She always will." That night, after Lila went to bed, he walked into her room to check on her. The moonlight streamed through the curtains, falling across her face and the teddy bear she still kept by her side. Her small hand rested over the bear's heart, the same place where the flash drive had once been hidden. He stood there quietly for a long time, listening to her steady breathing. A feeling washed over him, one of peace, gratitude, and awe. Downstairs, he returned to his desk and opened the notebook again. Beneath the foundation name, he wrote, "For Margaret and Lila, for truth, for courage, for the light that never fades." As he closed the book, the sound of soft rain began to fall outside, gentle and cleansing. The scent of wet earth drifted through the window. He thought about all the storms they had faced, each one leading them here, to this calm after so much darkness. The next morning, when Lila woke, The world smelled like new beginnings. She ran to the garden, where drops of rain glistened on every petal. One daisy had already opened overnight, its white petals bright against the damp soil. "Dad," she called. The first one bloomed. He joined her outside, still in his robe, smiling as he looked down at the small flower. "Your mother's favorite," he said. Lila knelt and touched the petal gently. "It feels like she is smiling at us." He looked at her, then at the sky that was beginning to clear. "Maybe she is." They stood together in the morning light, the first bloom of many shining between them. The garden would grow, the foundation would rise, and their story, their truth, would continue to bloom like those daisies, quietly, beautifully, and without end. Spring came early that year. The air over the Sterling estate felt lighter, almost as if the house itself had decided to breathe again. The trees that lined the long driveway were covered in small green buds, and the garden that Lila had planted was beginning to wake up. Tiny shoots of daisies pushed through the soil, their petals stretching toward the light. Lila spent most mornings outside, her boots covered in dirt, her cheeks warm from the Sunday. The quiet hum of life had returned. Birds fluttered across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, wind chimes played a soft, hopeful tune. Her father often joined her after breakfast, sometimes kneeling beside her to help, sometimes just standing nearby, watching her with the quiet pride of a man who had almost lost everything but found something better in its place. One morning as they worked together, Lila looked up and asked, "Dad, when will the foundation open?" He smiled. "The papers were signed yesterday. The first office will open next week in the city. We will call it Margaret's Promise." Her eyes brightened. "Can I help there too?" He nodded. "You already have. It was your courage that started it all." Lila smiled proudly, brushing dirt from her hands. "Then maybe we can help other people tell the truth too." "Yes," he said softly. "That is exactly what we will do." Later that day, Mrs. Dorsey brought in a delivery. A large box with the foundation's name printed across the side sat in the front hall. "It is from the printer's office," she said. They sent the first batch of flyers. Mr. Sterling opened the box and pulled one out. It was simple and beautiful. At the top was the same design. Lila had drawn a small hand holding a daisy. Beneath it were the words, "Margaret's Promise Foundation, a place where every child's voice matters." Lila looked at the flyer and smiled. "It is real now," she whispered. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart, it is real." That evening, as the sun began to set, they gathered on the porch with Mrs. Dorsey. The light painted everything gold. The garden glowed. The air smelled of grass and new beginnings. Mrs. Dorsey held a cup of tea in her hands. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" she said. "It feels like another life." Mr. Sterling nodded. "It does. There was a time I thought this house would never feel like home again." Lila looked between them. "Mom would be happy," she said softly. "She would," Mrs. Dorsey replied, her voice warm. "She would be proud of both of you." The three of them sat in a comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets begin their evening song. Inside the house, the faint ring of the phone broke the calm. Mr. Sterling went to answer it, and Lila followed him. He picked up the receiver. "Hello?" It was Detective Howard. His voice was calm, but there was something careful in his tone. "Mr. Sterling, I wanted to let you know that the case against Clara Hayden has officially concluded. She accepted full responsibility. The court sentenced her to 5 years with the possibility of early release for cooperation." Mr. Sterling exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Detective. There is something else," Howard continued. "Before she was transferred, she asked me to give you a message. She said, and I quote, 'Tell him that Margaret was right. Love cannot be stolen.'" There was a long pause before Mr. Sterling answered, "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." He hung up the phone and turned toward Lila, who was standing in the doorway. "Was it the detective?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. "He wanted to tell us that the case is finally closed." Lila hesitated. "What did she say?" He knelt down so that his eyes met hers. "She said something your mother already knew, that love cannot be stolen." Lila thought about it for a moment. "So even though she tried to take everything, she could not take love." He smiled. "Exactly." "Oh." Lila's gaze shifted to the window. The sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of pink and violet across the sky. "Then I think love wins," she said. Her father nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, it does." That night, the house glowed with a soft peace. After dinner, Lila went to her room and placed a small daisy from the garden into a glass of water by her bed. The flower leaned slightly to one side, its petals white against the dark window. She opened her notebook and began to write a letter addressed to her mother. "Dear Mom," she wrote, "we planted your daisies. The first one bloomed last week. Dad is smiling again. The truth helped us find the light. I think you would be proud of us. Love, Lila." When she finished, she placed the letter inside her sketchbook. "For later," she whispered. Downstairs, her father sat in his study, the fire burning low. He opened the notebook where he had written his plans for the foundation and added a final line beneath the mission statement: "To build a world where truth and kindness always meet." He closed the book, his gaze drifting to the photograph of Margaret. "We did it," he said quietly. "You, me, and her." A faint breeze moved through the open window, carrying the scent of daisies from the garden. It was soft and familiar, almost like an answer. When he turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, he paused by Lila's room. Through the half-open door, he could see her asleep, the small daisy glowing in the moonlight beside her. He smiled, closed the door gently, and whispered into the quiet, "Good night, my brave girl." Outside, the stars shimmered over the estate, and the garden swayed gently in the night breeze. The world that had once been filled with secrets now bloomed with truth, forgiveness, and love, the kind of love that endures every storm and keeps its promise long after the darkness fades. The morning sun spilled gently over the Sterling estate, touching every corner of the garden that now bloomed with white daisies. The flowers swayed in the breeze like small pieces of light dancing across the grass. Lila knelt near the center of the garden, her small hands cupped around a new sprout pushing through the soil. Her father stood a few feet away, holding a mug of coffee and watching her. There was something in his eyes that had not been there for a long time: peace. The kind of peace that came only after a long battle had ended. "Dad," Lila said, glancing up at him, "do you think Mom can see the garden?" He smiled softly. "I think she can see more than the garden, sweetheart. I think she can see us." Lila grinned. "Then she knows I am taking care of it." "She does," he said, walking closer. "And she would be proud." They worked side by side, trimming, watering, and placing small stones to form a path through the daisies. Mrs. Dorsey watched from the porch, her heart full as she listened to their laughter drift through the air. The house no longer echoed with loss. It sang quietly with life again. When the garden was done for the day, Lila wiped her hands and said, "Dad, can we visit the foundation office tomorrow? I want to see where the children will come." Her father nodded. "Of course. The building is ready, and the first families will arrive next week. You should see the reading room. They filled it with sunlight and painted the walls the color of daisies." Lila's eyes lit up. "Can we bring some flowers there?" He thought about it for a moment and smiled. "Yes, we can. It will remind everyone who walks in that truth and kindness grow together." That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Lila helped Mrs. Dorsey prepare dinner. The kitchen was filled with warm light, the smell of roasted vegetables, and soft music playing from an old radio. Mr. Sterling set the table, humming a tune that Margaret used to love. When they sat down to eat, Lila clasped her hands and said, "We should say thank you." Her father smiled. "For what?" "For everything," she said. "For Mom, for the truth, for this house, and for us." He reached across the table and held her hand. "Then let us say thank you together." They bowed their heads, and for a few quiet seconds, the world outside faded. The only thing that mattered was the steady rhythm of gratitude that filled the room. After dinner, Lila went to her room to draw. Her newest picture was of a little girl standing in a field of daisies, her arms open to the wind. Behind her was a tall man smiling, and above them, a bright sky filled with light. She wrote 3 words at the bottom of the page: truth, love, promise. Downstairs, Mr. Sterling sat in the study, reviewing final papers for the foundation. His desk was neat now, no more piles of forgotten documents, no hidden corners. Every paper had its place, every drawer was clean. When he looked up, The photograph of Margaret seemed to smile at him from its frame. He whispered quietly, "We kept your promise." The next morning arrived clear and bright. Lila woke early, excitement buzzing in her chest. She dressed quickly and ran downstairs. Her father was already waiting by the door with 2 vases full of daisies. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said, smiling wide. The drive to the city was calm. The foundation's new building stood tall and bright on a quiet street, its glass windows reflecting the morning light. The sign above the entrance read, "Margaret's Promise Foundation." When they walked inside, a few volunteers were arranging books and toys. The walls were painted soft yellow, and the air smelled faintly of new paint and hope. Lila placed her vase of daisies on a table near the window. The petals glowed in the sunlight. "Now it feels alive," she said. Her father nodded. "It feels like her." They walked through the rooms together, the art corner, the reading space, the counseling office where families would soon sit and share their stories. Each room felt full of purpose, built not from wealth but from healing. In the main hall hung a framed plaque. Lila stopped to read it aloud. "Dedicated to Margaret Sterling, who believed that light begins with kindness." Her voice trembled slightly at the last word. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You see, sweetheart, her kindness still grows. Through you, through this place." Lila turned to him. "Do you think the children who come here will find their light too?" He smiled. "I know they will, because you already did." They spent the rest of the morning helping arrange books and greeting a few early visitors who came to learn about the foundation. Lila's laughter filled the hallways, echoing softly through the new space like music. When they finally left, the sun was high, and the daisies in the window swayed gently in the breeze. Lila looked back one last time and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Her father heard her and said, "She heard you." The drive home was quiet but peaceful. As they turned into the long driveway, Lila noticed something glowing in the garden. The evening sun had caught the petals of the daisies, and for a moment, they looked like a field of tiny stars. She pressed her hand against the window. "Look, Dad, they are shining." He smiled, his eyes soft. "That is what truth does, Lila. It shines no matter how dark it gets." That night, before she went to bed, Lila opened her window and looked out at the garden. The moonlight made the daisies shimmer silver. She whispered softly, "Good night, Mom. Good night, truth." And in the quiet of that moment, the house seemed to breathe again, steady, warm, alive, carrying the sound of a promise kept, and the light of a little girl's courage that had changed everything. The following weekend arrived with the first warmth of early summer. The air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass, and the Sterling garden was now a sea of white daisies swaying in the gentle breeze. Lila stood on the porch, barefoot, watching the flowers move like waves under the golden light. Her father stepped out behind her, still adjusting the sleeves of his linen shirt. "You have been out here since dawn," he said, smiling. "Are you talking to the flowers again?" She turned to him with a grin. "Maybe. They listen better than people do." He laughed softly. "Then they are very lucky to have you as their friend." The garden had grown into more than a patch of earth. It had become a symbol of what they had survived. Each daisy carried a piece of their story, rooted in pain but blooming with truth. After breakfast, they packed the car with boxes filled with art supplies, children's books, and small toys. The foundation's first family event was happening that day, a gathering for children from nearby shelters and foster homes. Lila had spent the whole week preparing drawings and decorations. "Do you think they will like it?" she asked as they drove toward the city. "I think they will love it," her father said, "because you made it with your heart." When they arrived at the foundation, volunteers were already setting up tables outside. The building looked bright and inviting under the morning sunday. Lila helped hang a banner that read, "A Day of Light, Margaret's Promise Foundation." Children began arriving soon after. Some were shy, clutching the hands of their caretakers. Others ran ahead, curious and excited. Lila greeted each one with a smile. She guided them to the art table where crayons and paper waited. "You can draw anything you want," she told them. "Something that makes you feel happy." A little boy with messy hair looked at her and said, "Can I draw my dog? He is not with me anymore." Lila nodded gently. "Yes, you can draw him. Sometimes when we draw what we miss, it comes closer to our heart again." The boy smiled and began to draw. Mr. Sterling watched from a distance, his chest swelling with pride. He had seen many powerful things in his life, but nothing compared to this, a little girl turning pain into purpose. As the day went on, the courtyard filled with laughter. Volunteers read stories, painted faces, and handed out sandwiches. The sound of children's joy echoed through the air like music. Lila sat beside a group of girls drawing flowers. One of them, no older than 6, looked up and asked, "Are these real daisies from your garden?" Lila nodded. "Yes, they are my mom's favorite." She said daisies mean hope. The little girl smiled shyly. "Then I'm going to draw a lot of them." By noon, the tables were covered in colorful drawings, flowers, families, sunshine, and words like home and love. When the event ended, Mr. Sterling stood before the crowd and said a few words. His voice was calm, but emotion trembled underneath. "This foundation began with a promise," he said. "A promise my wife made to build something that helps children find safety and truth. My daughter reminded me that even when life feels heavy, light can still grow." He looked at Lila, and she smiled at him, her eyes bright. The crowd clapped, and for a moment, he saw Margaret in her, the same kindness, the same strength. After the families left, Lila helped clean up. The sun was lower now, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. She found one forgotten drawing on a table, a daisy surrounded by small stars. In the corner, a child had written, "Thank you for making us feel seen." She held the paper to her chest and whispered, "You are welcome." When they returned home, the sky had turned a soft lavender. Mrs. Dorsey was waiting on the porch, waving as they parked. "So, how did it go?" she asked. Lila ran up to her, nearly tripping on the steps. "It was perfect. The children drew everything. One of them even drew daisies like ours." Mrs. Dorsey smiled, her eyes glistening. "Your mother would be proud." Inside, the house glowed with evening warmth. Mr. Sterling set the last box down and sank into his favorite chair. "You were amazing today," he said to Lila. "You did what most adults forget how to do. You gave without expecting anything back." Lila climbed into his lap. It felt like Mom was there. He wrapped his arms around her. Maybe she was. Maybe she always is. They sat together quietly as the last light of day slipped through the windows. The garden outside shimmered in the fading glow, each daisy reflecting the sunset like tiny mirrors. "Dad," Lila said softly, "what will we do next?" He thought for a moment. "We will keep helping people. That is what truth is supposed to do. It keeps growing." Lila nodded. "Then we will plant more daisies." He smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, as many as we can." Later that night, after she fell asleep, he stood by her window, looking out at the moonlit garden. The daisies swayed gently in the breeze, glowing faintly under the silver light. For a moment, he imagined Margaret standing among them, her laughter soft, her eyes kind. He whispered, "She did it, Maggie. She gave us back our light." Outside, the wind carried the scent of flowers through the open window. It was gentle, eternal, and full of life, just like the promise that had begun it all. The following week, sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the Sterling home, painting the walls in soft gold. The house was alive again with quiet purpose. Papers, sketches, and new ideas for the foundation were spread across the kitchen table, and Lila sat among them with a focused expression that made her look older than her years. Her father entered the room with 2 glasses of orange juice. "You have been working all morning," he said. "What are you drawing this time?" Lila smiled, pushing the paper toward him. "It is a map," she said proudly. "A map for the next garden. I want every family who comes to the foundation to plant a daisy for someone they love." He looked down at her drawing. It showed rows of daisies in every color, with a small path winding through the middle. In the corner, she had written, "Garden of Truth." "That is beautiful, Lila," he said. "Your mother would have loved it." I think she already does," Lila said, her voice soft but sure. He smiled and touched the top of her head gently. "We will make it happen." After breakfast, they drove back to the city to meet with the foundation board. The building was busy now, full of volunteers and families who had started coming for support. Posters lined the walls, each one carrying the foundation's symbol, a hand holding a daisy. When they entered the main hall, several children ran up to Lila, calling her name. "You helped us draw last week," one of them said. Look, we put our pictures on the wall. Lila's eyes widened. The far wall was covered in drawings, hundreds of them. Flowers, stars, smiling faces, even the words "thank you" written in colorful letters. Her father smiled quietly, watching the look on her face. "You did this," he said. "You gave them hope." She turned to him, her voice trembling slightly. "We did it, Dad, together." In the meeting room, Mr. Sterling spoke to the volunteers and coordinators. "Our next step," he said, "is to create community gardens across the city. Lila has given us the idea and even designed the layout." Everyone applauded, and Lila's cheeks flushed pink. "We will call it the Garden of Truth," she said shyly. "It will be a place where people can remember that good things grow from honesty." That afternoon, while her father handled paperwork, Lila sat in the reading room helping a little girl learn to write her name. The girl's fingers trembled as she held the pencil. "I cannot do it," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Lila said gently. "You just have to try again." The girl pressed harder, and the letters slowly appeared. When she finished, she looked up at Lila with wide eyes. "I did it." "You did," Lila said, smiling. "Now you will never forget that name, because it is yours." The girl hugged her tightly before running off. Lila watched her go, her heart swelling with warmth. When they returned home that evening, the scent of the garden greeted them before they even reached the front steps. The daisies had multiplied, filling the yard with white and yellow blossoms. Mrs. Dorsey was trimming the edges of the path. "You have visitors," she said, smiling. Standing by the porch were two reporters from the local paper. "Mr. Sterling," one of them said, "we are writing a story about the new foundation. May we speak with you and your daughter?" He looked at Lila. "It is your choice." She hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps other people tell the truth, then yes." They sat on the porch as the sun began to set. The reporter asked gentle questions about the garden, the daisies, and how everything began. Lila answered carefully, her voice soft but strong. "My mom believed that light begins with kindness," she said. "We lost her, but we did not lose what she taught us. When people tell the truth, they bring back that light." The reporter lowered her pen and smiled. "You are very brave, Lila." Lila shook her head. "I am not brave. I just listened to what the truth said." When the interview ended, the reporters thanked them and left. The evening deepened into quiet twilight. Fireflies began to flicker among the flowers, tiny sparks in the growing dark. Her father leaned back on the porch railing, watching her chase the glowing lights. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. Lila stopped and looked up. "What?" "I see the reason your mother believed in hope," he said. "I see her strength living in you." Lila smiled. "Then we are both part of her story." He nodded. "Yes, and we are still writing it." A cool wind drifted through the garden, carrying the faint scent of daisies. Lila turned her face toward it, her eyes half closed. "It smells like Mom's perfume," she whispered. Her father's heart clenched gently. Maybe that is her way of saying she is proud of us. They stood together under the stars, the soft sound of crickets filling the night. The garden glowed faintly in the moonlight, each flower like a small promise that truth, once planted, would keep blooming forever. Before heading inside, Lila picked one daisy and held it out to her father. "For you," she said, "because you believed me when no one else did." He took the flower, his throat tight. "And because you never stopped believing in the truth." She smiled and said softly, "That is what love does. It believes." The moon rose higher, silver and calm, casting light across their faces. The house behind them stood steady and peaceful, the home that had once been filled with silence now alive with the gentle sound of faith restored. In that moment, under the moon and the scent of daisies, the Sterling family story felt whole, rooted in love, watered by truth, and forever growing toward the light. The next morning began with the soft hum of bees drifting between the daisies. The Sterling estate was wrapped in a peaceful stillness that felt earned like a long sigh after years of holding one's breath. The sunlight streamed through the curtains in Lila's room, touching her drawings pinned along the wall, flowers, smiling faces, and a small house by a lake. She woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of her father's voice calling from downstairs. "Breakfast is ready, sweetheart." When she entered the kitchen, Her father was setting the table while Mrs. Dorsey poured juice into 2 glasses. "Good morning, my little artist," the housekeeper said. "The paper came today. You might want to see the front page." Lila blinked. "The paper?" Mrs. Dorsey handed it to her. Across the top, bold letters read, "A child's courage brings light. The story behind Margaret's Promise Foundation." Beneath the headline was a photo of Lila standing in the garden, daisies blooming around her like a crown. Her father smiled softly. "They printed your story." Lila stared at the page for a long time, her eyes wide. "People will read this?" "Yes," he said. "People will know the truth. And maybe it will remind them that kindness still matters." She looked down at the picture and whispered, "Then it is not just our story anymore." After breakfast, the phone began to ring. Messages poured in letters from families, schools, and organizations across the country. Some wanted to support the foundation. Others simply wanted to thank Lila for reminding them of hope. One letter arrived from a small town miles away. The handwriting was shaky but neat. It read, "My daughter saw your story and planted her first daisy today. She says it is her truth flower. Thank you for helping her believe again." Lila held the letter against her heart. "Dad," she said softly, "the daisies are spreading." He smiled. "Just like your mother wanted." Later that afternoon, they visited the foundation. The main hall was busier than ever. New volunteers had arrived, some carrying boxes of supplies, others bringing seedlings for the community garden project. As they walked through the hall, everyone greeted Lila with smiles. "You are the girl from the paper," one volunteer said. "You are the reason this place exists." Lila blushed. "No, my mom is the reason. I just listened to her voice." Her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That is what makes you special. You listen when others forget how." In the courtyard, workers had begun preparing the ground for the Garden of Truth. Rows of soil waited to be planted. Each patch had a small wooden marker where children could write the names of loved ones they wanted to honor. Lila picked up one of the markers and wrote a single word, "Mom." She placed it in the first row, her hands steady. The wind brushed through her hair as if in answer. "There," she said softly. "Now she will always be here too." As the day went on, more children arrived with their families. They each planted daisies, some for parents, some for friends, some for dreams they hoped would come true. The garden quickly filled with laughter and color. Mr. Sterling spoke to a group of parents near the entrance. "This began as a promise," he said. "A promise to rebuild trust and hope. Today, that promise belongs to all of you." Lila stood beside him, her eyes bright. "And daisies do not need much to grow," she added. "Just a little care and a lot of truth." Everyone laughed softly, touched by her words. As the sun lowered, the courtyard shimmered with light. Dozens of daisies stood tall in the new soil, glowing under the golden sky. Children ran between them, their laughter blending with the breeze. When evening came, Lila and her father stayed behind after everyone left. The garden was quiet again, except for the gentle rustle of leaves. The air smelled of earth and blossoms. Her father knelt beside one of the flower beds. "You know," he said, "I used to think that strength meant never falling apart, but watching you taught me something different." "What?" Lila asked, crouching beside him. "That real strength is telling the truth, even when it scares you. It is trusting that love will hold you up after the truth changes everything." Lila nodded thoughtfully. "Then Mom was strong too." He smiled. "She was the strongest person I ever knew, and now you carry that strength." The wind picked up slightly, brushing the daisies until they swayed like a living sea of white and yellow. Lila looked out over the flowers and whispered, "Mom, the garden is growing, and so am I." Her father placed his arm around her shoulders. "You have given the world something beautiful, Lila. You turned our pain into light." She leaned into him, her small frame warm against his. "We did it together." They sat there until the first stars appeared. Fireflies began to blink in the distance, tiny echoes of the daisy's brightness. As they prepared to leave, Lila picked one flower and handed it to her father. "This one is for you," she said, "because you never stopped believing in me." He accepted it with a quiet smile. "And this one," he said, plucking another daisy and tucking it gently behind her ear, is for you because you reminded me what truth sounds like." That the two of them walked toward the gate, the garden glowing behind them under the soft moonlight. The night air carried the faintest echo of laughter and the whisper of petals. In that moment, the world felt full again, full of forgiveness, full of hope, and full of the kind of truth that never fades, not even when the sun goes down. A few weeks later, the Sterling estate glowed beneath the soft blush of early summer dawn. Dew sparkled across the petals of hundreds of daisies, each one standing tall as if greeting the morning. The air carried the scent of fresh rain from the night before, and the sound of birds calling through the open windows filled the house with gentle music. Lila stood barefoot in the garden, wearing one of her mother's old scarves tied around her shoulders. The silk fluttered behind her as she moved between the rows, checking each bloom like a caretaker inspecting her treasure. She stopped at the first flower she had planted and smiled. "You made it," she whispered. "You kept growing." Her father watched from the porch, his hands tucked into his pockets, a warm expression softening his face. "Talking to them again?" he asked. She turned, laughing. "They listen better than people, remember?" He chuckled and walked toward her, the morning sun catching in his hair. "I think they are listening because you speak the truth." Lila looked up at him, her eyes bright and steady. "Truth makes things grow," she said simply. "Yes," he replied. "It does." Inside the house, Mrs. Dorsey was preparing breakfast. The smell of toast and strawberries drifted through the air. On the kitchen table sat a stack of envelopes, letters from people all over the country who had read about the foundation. Some sent donations, others sent photographs of their own gardens. One envelope contained a simple drawing from a child, a daisy blooming inside a heart. When Mr. Sterling and Lila came in, Mrs. Dorsey handed the drawing to her. "This one came from a little girl in Ohio," she said. She wrote that she planted her daisy for her brother who was far away. Lila traced the outline of the drawing with her finger. "It is beautiful," she said. "Can we hang it in the foundation's office?" "Of course," her father said. "It will remind everyone why we started all of this." They sat together for breakfast, sunlight spilling across the table. The quiet between them was not heavy anymore. It was the silence of people who understood one another without words. After breakfast, they drove to the city to meet with the volunteers at the foundation. The main hall was full of new faces, teachers, artists, and families who wanted to help. The Garden of Truth had grown beyond their first vision. There were now small gardens in schools, hospitals, and even parks. Everywhere the daisies bloomed, people began to share their stories of forgiveness, courage, and new beginnings. As Lila walked through the hall, she noticed a framed photo of her mother that had been placed near the entrance. Beneath it were the words, "Her light began with kindness, and it never went out." She stopped for a moment and whispered, "Hi, Mom. We are still keeping your promise." "Oh," her father joined her, standing quietly by her side. "She would be proud of you, Lila." You carried her voice farther than either of us could have imagined. Lila smiled softly. "You helped too. You listened." He nodded. "We both learned how." That evening, after returning home, they stood on the porch again. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the garden. Fireflies blinked lazily over the flowers. Lila leaned against the railing, her voice thoughtful. "Dad, do you think the truth ever stops growing?" He looked at her, the light reflecting in his eyes. "No, sweetheart. The truth keeps growing wherever there is love to tend it." She smiled, her gaze drifting over the daisies glowing under the fading light. "Then we will keep tending it." The wind moved softly through the flowers, carrying the scent of earth and hope. The house behind them stood tall and warm, its windows glowing with the quiet promise of peace. As the last traces of sunlight disappeared, Lila reached for her father's hand. "Good night, Mom," she whispered toward the stars. "The garden is still shining." And in the hush that followed, the world seemed to listen, the daisies, the wind, the earth all holding the same truth close, that love, once planted, never truly fades. The final days of summer settled gently over the Sterling home. The air was warm, filled with the steady hum of bees and the faint rustle of leaves. The daisies in the garden had grown tall, their petals open wide beneath the sunlight, stretching toward the sky like small hands reaching for heaven. Lila sat on the porch steps, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her pencil moved carefully, tracing the outline of the garden she had planted with her father months ago. In her drawing, each daisy shone like a star, and at the center stood a figure of a woman, smiling softly. She wrote beneath it, "The light never left." Her father stepped outside carrying 2 cups of lemonade. "You have been out here all morning," he said, handing her one. "Are you drawing something special?" Lila smiled, holding the book toward him. "It is the whole story. Everything we did. Everything Mom taught us." He looked at the page for a long moment, his eyes misting. "You captured it perfectly," he said quietly. "Every truth, every bit of hope." The wind brushed through the garden, bending the flowers slightly. Lila glanced toward them. "Do you think people will keep planting daisies, even when we are not here?" He nodded. "They will. Because what you planted was not just flowers, Lila. You planted courage. You planted kindness. That will keep growing forever." She rested her head on his shoulder. Then Mom's promise came true. "Yes," he whispered. "It did." That afternoon, they drove once more to the foundation. The building felt different now, alive, busy, full of laughter. The courtyard garden had expanded, its paths lined with bright blooms. Families walked through it slowly, reading the small wooden markers left by others. Each name, each word, carried a story of love. Lila stopped near the first row where her mother's marker still stood. The daisy she had planted months ago had multiplied, spreading across the soil. She knelt down and touched the petals gently. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "You see? It worked." Her father stood behind her, his voice warm and steady. "You made her dream real." As they walked through the garden together, the air was filled with the sound of children's voices, soft laughter, gentle songs, and the rustle of life continuing. The same truth that had once nearly broken their world was now the reason it stood strong. When the sun began to set, the 2 of them returned home. The sky glowed orange and pink, and the first stars began to appear. On the porch, they sat side by side, watching the light fade over the field of daisies. Lila spoke softly. "Dad, what happens now?" He smiled. "Now we keep living. We keep telling the truth, and we keep loving." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the last gold of the sunset. "Then that will be our new promise." The wind carried her words across the garden, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the earth itself was listening. The daisies swayed, the stars brightened, and the house behind them glowed softly in the evening light. In that quiet, gentle moment, everything was complete. The past had been forgiven, the truth had been spoken, and love, steady, humble, and eternal, had found its home again.